You can tell a good director in about 5 minutes. Doesn't take longer. If you've been around at all, you spot a director in 5 minutes.
Richard Widmark was never your typical Hollywood leading man. With his icy stare, razor-sharp delivery, and unforgettable debut as the sadistic gangster Tommy Udo in Kiss of Death, 1947, Widmark instantly carved out a reputation as one of cinema's most electrifying villains. But while audiences loved his intensity on screen, those who worked with him behind the camera often had a very different story to tell. Known for his professionalism, Widmark also carried a fiery streak. He hated arrogance, despised unprepared actors, and had little patience for egos that clashed with his own commitment to the craft. For a man who never wanted to be a star in the first place, Hollywood's politics, rivalries, and inflated personalities were often unbearable. Over the course of his 5-decade career, Widmark crossed paths with some of the biggest names in film history. Some became lifelong friends and collaborators. But others, whether through personality clashes, creative disagreements, or outright hostility, landed firmly on his list of actors he loathed working with. And while Widmark was usually private about his personal grudges, enough behind-the-scenes stories and insider accounts have surfaced to paint a clear picture. Not everyone could survive the intensity of Richard Widmark. From Golden Age icons to rising stars of the 1970s, these 5 names stand out as the actors who, in Widmark's eyes, turned collaboration into combat. Richard Widmark's career began with a bang, literally. His 1947 debut in Kiss of Death shocked audiences and critics alike. Playing the psychopathic gangster Tommy Udo, Widmark pushed a wheelchair-bound woman down a flight of stairs with a chilling grin that audiences never forgot. It was a performance so iconic that it earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Practically overnight, Widmark became one of the most recognizable and feared faces in Hollywood. But here's the twist. Widmark never wanted to be a star. Unlike many of his peers, he didn't crave the spotlight, nor did he enjoy Hollywood's endless parties and publicity stunts. A deeply private man, Widmark often described acting as a job rather than a calling. He once admitted he had little patience for the Hollywood machine, preferring quiet nights at home to the glamour of red carpets. Born in 1914 in Sunrise Township, Minnesota, Widmark grew up during the Great Depression. His Midwestern roots shaped his work ethic and grounded his personality. Before Hollywood came calling, he built a solid reputation on radio and stage, where discipline and preparation were essential. That same discipline followed him to film sets, and would later cause friction with actors who didn't share his level of professionalism. Throughout the late 1940s and 1950s, Widmark became a staple of the film noir genre. With films like Night in the City, 1950, and Pickup on South Street, 1953, he specialized in complex anti-heroes, men who lived in the shadows, morally ambiguous and often doomed. Audiences loved him and critics respected him. Yet Widmark himself grew weary of being typecast as villains and gangsters. He longed for variety, pushing back against studios that tried to pigeonhole him. By the 1960s and 1970s, Widmark had expanded his range, appearing in westerns, war dramas, and thrillers. Films like Judgment at Nuremberg, 1961, and Madigan, 1968, proved he was more than just a noir heavy. But despite his success, Widmark never warmed to Hollywood's ego-driven culture. He disliked actors who showed up unprepared, who treated crews poorly, or who relied on star power instead of hard work. This outlook earned him a reputation as both a consummate professional and a difficult co-star. Directors loved his reliability, but actors who clashed with him often described him as cold or intolerant. Widmark himself admitted he had little tolerance for phonies, and in an industry built on illusion that made him both respected and resented. In truth, Widmark was a reluctant star. Acting gave him financial security and fame, but it also trapped him in an industry he often despised. He valued integrity above celebrity, which made him a rarity in Hollywood, but also a magnet for conflict. Those who worked hard and respected the craft found in him a loyal collaborator. But those who tested his patience, They ended up on his private list of actors he hated working with. If you only knew Richard Widmark from his films, you might assume he was as cold and ruthless off-screen as the characters he so often played. But the truth was more complicated. Widmark was fiercely professional, intensely disciplined, and deeply respectful of the filmmaking process. To crews, he was courteous and reliable. To directors, he was a dream, always on time, always prepared, and never a diva. But to certain co-stars, he could be a nightmare. Widmark had one rule he lived by on set: respect the work. He believed acting was not about fame or vanity, but about storytelling and commitment. That meant showing up prepared, knowing your lines, and giving your all in every scene. When fellow actors didn't meet those standards, Widmark had little patience. He could be blunt, even cutting, if he felt someone was coasting on reputation rather than effort. Part of this came from his roots in radio and theater, where mistakes could not be edited out. In those mediums, every line mattered. That mindset carried over into his film career. He despised actors who came unprepared or wasted time with theatrics. To him, it was unprofessional and disrespectful, not just to him, but to the entire crew. Unlike many stars of his era, Widmark also avoided the trappings of Hollywood social circles. He wasn't the type to smooth things over at parties or pretend to like someone he didn't. If he clashed with a co-star, he rarely hid it. This honesty won him admiration from some, but it also meant he built up a list of grudges over the years. Widmark's on-set intensity could also make collaboration difficult. He was laser-focused during filming, and some actors found his intensity intimidating. While this often elevated the performances around him, it also created tension. He wasn't one to joke between takes or play the Hollywood charm game. Instead, he kept his distance, staying in character or quietly preparing for the next shot. For actors who thrived on camaraderie and ego-stroking, Widmark's aloofness could feel like disdain. But those who earned his respect often described him as generous. When he admired a co-star's talent and work ethic, he gave them his full support. For example, Widmark held deep respect for directors like Elia Kazan and Stanley Kramer, as well as actors who, like him, treated the craft seriously. The difference between those he admired and those he despised came down to one word: authenticity. It's no surprise, then, that Widmark often butted heads with larger-than-life Hollywood personalities. The golden age of cinema was full of stars who thrived on ego, who demanded special treatment, or who coasted on charm rather than talent. For Widmark, that was unforgivable. He may have played villains, but in real life, he reserved his scorn for those who betrayed the integrity of the craft. Behind the camera, Richard Widmark was both respected and feared. He was a man of principles in an industry often accused of having none. And while his commitment to professionalism made him a Hollywood legend, it also fueled some of the most memorable feuds of his career. Richard Widmark's career spanned more than 5 decades, which meant he worked with nearly every type of actor Hollywood had to offer, from established legends to fresh newcomers. And while he never actively sought conflict, his intolerance for arrogance, laziness, or dishonesty led to more than a few bitter feuds. One of the earliest was with Sidney Poitier during the tense filming of The Bedford Incident, 1965. The film itself was designed to be claustrophobic and combative, and the tension between Widmark and Poitier sometimes spilled off screen. Widmark admired Poitier's talent but felt he occasionally resisted direction in ways that slowed down production. Poitier, on the other hand, reportedly saw Widmark as too rigid, too controlling. Their disagreements, while professional, created a simmering rivalry that lingered long after filming wrapped. Another clash came with Marlon Brando, who represented everything Widmark disliked in an actor. Brando was a genius, no doubt, but he was also known for showing up unprepared, improvising lines, and frustrating directors. Widmark, with his theater-honed discipline, saw Brando's freewheeling style as a lack of respect for the craft. Though they never headlined a film together, their paths crossed socially and within Hollywood circles, and Widmark reportedly made little secret of his disdain for Brando's unorthodox methods. His relationship with John Wayne was equally complicated. Both men were icons of American cinema, but their approaches and their politics couldn't have been more different. Widmark admired Wayne's screen presence, but loathed his domineering personality off-screen. Wayne was used to being the unquestioned leader on set, while Widmark believed every actor should stand on equal footing. Their collaboration in The Alamo, 1960, left Widmark frustrated, with him later describing the experience as one of the most difficult of his career. Widmark also had a well-known disdain for Robert Mitchum, though in truth the two were more opposites than enemies. Mitchum's laid-back, almost careless attitude toward acting clashed with Widmark's precision and seriousness. To Widmark, Mitchum was too casual, too willing to coast on charisma. They respected each other as professionals but rarely saw eye to eye on set. Even in the 1970s, when Widmark was transitioning into character roles, his standards never softened. During Murder on the Orient Express, 1974, which featured an all-star cast, he grew frustrated with some of the big personalities involved. Though he kept his grievances mostly private, insiders have suggested he felt some actors, accustomed to being the star of their own films, treated the ensemble nature of the production with arrogance. What's important to note, however, is that Widmark's feuds weren't based on petty jealousy or insecurity. He never cared about being the most famous or the highest paid. His clashes always came down to respect, or the lack of it. If an actor showed up late, forgot lines, or treated others poorly, Widmark was quick to call them out. In an industry built on diplomacy and backroom deals, his blunt honesty was both refreshing and dangerous. These feuds, though sometimes fiery, also reveal the uncompromising side of Widmark's character. He wasn't interested in playing the Hollywood game, and that refusal often set him against some of the industry's most powerful figures. But it also earned him the respect of those who valued authenticity over ego. Richard Widmark wasn't the type to broadcast grudges. He lived a relatively private life outside of Hollywood and avoided scandal whenever possible. But behind closed doors, and occasionally in interviews, he made it clear there were certain actors he never wanted to share the screen with again. These 5 names represent the peak of his frustration, the actors whose working styles clashed most violently with his own. Number. John Wayne Widmark's distaste for John Wayne was no secret. Their collaboration on The Alamo, 1960, where Wayne not only starred but directed, left Widmark seething. Wayne's commanding, almost dictatorial approach grated on Widmark's nerves. He believed Wayne's ego overshadowed the film itself, and he hated the lack of collaboration on set. Widmark later described the experience as miserable, a rare instance where he openly criticized a co-star. Number. Marlon Brando. Although they didn't share much screen time, Widmark's dislike for Brando was rooted in principle. Brando's improvisational, sometimes erratic style was the antithesis of Widmark's disciplined approach. Brando's habit of showing up unprepared infuriated him, and he considered Brando's antics disrespectful to the entire cast and crew. To Widmark, Brando was a cautionary tale of brilliance marred by ego. Number. Robert Mitchum. On the surface, Widmark and Mitchum might have seemed like natural allies, both tough guy actors, both cynical about Hollywood. But their temperaments couldn't have been more different. Mitchum's famously lazy approach to acting clashed with Widmark's intensity. While they maintained a professional respect, Widmark often expressed irritation at Mitchum's casualness, which he saw as bordering on contempt for the work. Number. Sidney Poitier. Though their conflict was more professional than personal, Widmark's clash with Poitier on the Bedford Incident, 1965, made a lasting impression. Widmark respected Poitier's immense talent, but the two men butted heads over creative differences. Poitier resisted Widmark's attempts at control, and Widmark found the younger actor's defiance difficult to tolerate. Their tension never fully resolved, leaving a scar on what could have been a powerful working partnership. Number. Richard Boone. Perhaps the least famous name on this list. Boone was nonetheless a source of frustration for Widmark during various television and film projects. Boone was known for his gruffness and sometimes volatile behavior, and his unpredictable moods often disrupted filming. Widmark had little patience for such volatility, considering it unprofessional and distracting. Boone's presence on set reportedly drove Widmark to vow he'd never work with him again. Taken together, these 5 names reveal a pattern. Widmark's hatred was never random. It was rooted in his unwavering principles. He demanded respect, professionalism, and authenticity. Those who gave him that earned his admiration. Those who didn't found themselves on his blacklist. What makes this list so fascinating is that it includes some of the most iconic names in cinema history. Wayne, Brando, Portier, Mitchum, these are titans of Hollywood. Yet Widmark was unafraid to call them out, even if it meant alienating himself from the inner circle of stardom.